Welcome back, everybody. We're breaking down UFC Fight Night, Luque versus Muhammad 2. Obviously, a rematch between the two. A very interesting rematch at that. Both guys fought very early in their career, so I do expect the dynamic to change a little bit going into this matchup, but the rest of the card is very interesting as well. Lots of fun fights, a few low-key bangers on here as well. Usually these Fight Night cards after a numbered event, usually pretty weak, but this card does look pretty solid. Pretty heavily invested in this card as well from a betting perspective. But regardless, I do think this is going to be a pretty fun card. But of course, I do want to recap the previous event, coming off of UFC 273. Great card, lots to unpack there. So let's get right into it. Kicking off the early prelims, we had Julio Arce, I should say, versus Daniel Santos. A fight I initially didn't really want to get invested in. But, I did end up putting like 0.2 units on Santos to win by knockout. Really did not like what I saw from Arce at the weigh-ins. I don't usually put too much stock into the weigh-ins, but he really did look terrible up there. And I believe, he weighed in after the allotted time, so I thought that maybe he was really trying to kill himself to make the weight limit. Missed it, and obviously he is coming off of a knockout and against a very dynamic striker like Santos. I thought the knockout might be live here. Wasn't uber confident because, again, I don't put too much stock into these weigh-ins, and obviously it didn't materialize, but at the end of the day, it was just a levels fight there. Arce just showing that, he is a proven UFC level fighter, whereas Santos, making his UFC debut, didn't really come close to getting the knockout. Fight wasn't really even close at all. But moving along, Pura Rodriguez, Kay Hansen. I did have a bet on Rodriguez here. I thought she'd do a little more work on the feet, but she was able to mix up her game a bit here, working the wrestling, and that was what really won her that final round. So good on her for making that adjustment and expanding that part of her game. But moving along, Alexei Oleinik, Jared Vanderaa. I don't think I broke this fight down. I think the fight got announced a little bit after after I dropped my video. But a fight I completely just avoided. Very high variance, somewhat low level. Oleinik, the much better fighter, but also much, much older as well. Oleinik, snatches up the early submission like he usually does against Vanderaa, who's probably going to get cut. But moving along, Mickey Gall, Mike Malott, another fight I didn't really want to get invested in. One with a lot of variance, not really sure what Malott was going to look like, coming in, not having that much cage time against Mickey Gall, who, in my opinion, is not a great fighter either, but, is someone who's fought at the UFC level. Kind of happy that Malott was able to pick up the W there. Pretty fun fight while it did last. But we move on. Aspinall, Raquel Pennington. I did end up putting a couple units on Pennington to win by decision. I just thought she'd be the better fighter pretty much everywhere. And, it was pretty easy cash. I don't think she was really in any trouble at any point. I don't think she was close to getting the finish at any point either. So, yeah, cashed pretty easily there. Anthony Hernandez, Josh Fremd did have the under in this fight parlayed. Not terribly upset about it. I felt that there were plenty of opportunities from both guys, actually, to get the finish. Didn't materialize, obviously, but I do think that, it was close enough where I can't be too upset about it. Did expect a little more, striking, but, it was a very grapple-heavy fight. Moving along, Ian Gary, Darian Weeks. Had Gary parlayed, and I did also take Gary to win by decision. I just felt that Gary's just the slightly better fighter in most areas. Wasn't sure why the KO line or the inside the distance line was, as favored as it was, I guess, because Gary, while he has gotten a ton of finishes, I think he's finishing a lot of bums, honestly, and I don't think Darian Weeks is a bum. I think Darian Weeks is good enough that he should have just survived against Gary, and that's kind of what he did. It was a very close fight, but cashed that. Leg of the parlay, also cashed a small bet on the Gary by decision as well. So we move along. Vince Pichel, Mark O'Manson, and, I was on the Pichel side. I did bet Pichel as well. Pretty bad bet, especially at the price that I got Pichel at. Expected a bigger gap between the two in terms of the striking, but that was pretty close, and Madsen was able to secure takedowns and control time to win a decision here. We move along. Mackenzie Dern, Tisha Torres, another one that not that great either, right? But I felt Tisha Torres by decision wasn't a terrible bet because, she did take a round off Dern. I do think that first round could have swung either way, but at the end of the day, Tisha Torres, I think is just giving up too much size for this division. It looked like she might have been struggling with the length of Dern, in addition to the grappling as well. So Not the best bet, but not one I'm like terribly upset about either. But moving along, Gilbert Burns comes out Chimaev. Not a fight I got invested in at all. Just a fight I wanted to sit back and really enjoy and, get some reads in. And, I did pick Kianzad to win by knockout in this fight. But, as we saw in like the Gary's fight, when we see these guys who are finishers, on the regionals, they're finishing low-level guys. They take that step up against better fighters, guys who are better defensively, guys who are a little more durable. The finish doesn't come as easily, and we see Kianzad win a pretty close decision here. But, an absolute banger of a fight. We did learn quite a few things about Kianzad after that fight. And I do think it's good that he did get extended. We really saw his cardio tested, his heart tested, his durability tested, and just a lot of things that, you like to see, from a guy who's been getting a ton of first-round finishes, right? And I do feel it's a good learning lesson and a bit of a reality check for Kianzad as well. Once you get into that top 5, top 2, top 3, you're going to be going up against elite-level guys who aren't just going to fold as easily in there, and I do think that going forward, we're going to see Kianzad really polish up the rest of his game, maybe come in with a bit more of a game plan, because obviously you're not just going to show up and smash top-level guys like you are against guys like, John Phillips and Reese McKee. But yeah, very, very close fight. I think it's undeniable that, Kianzad is very clearly on this level. Obviously, I do think his game needs a bit more polishing up, after that performance, but I do think that the guy's definitely got the skills and the tools to succeed in the division. And honestly, if I'm Usman, I'm pushing for that Kianzad title defense ASAP, hopefully within the year, because, you got to kill this guy early, because otherwise, you give him more time to get better while Usman starts to age out of his prime a little bit more. It's going to be a tougher and tougher fight with, each passing moment. So, if I'm Usman, I'm pushing for that fight, after this Leon Edwards defense. But honestly, after that performance, I don't know if the UFC is going to really want to push Chimaev into that quick of a title shot. I think they maybe want to slow cook him a little bit, let him get matched up with someone like Colby, who, not super dangerous, but, is a pretty good test for someone at that level. Maybe even the winner of, next week's card, or maybe just Bilal, because Luque is still a pretty damn dangerous fighter. But yeah, basically just let Chimaev round out the rest of his game, polish it up a little bit, get a few more reps in, get a little more cage time while Usman starts to age out a little bit, and hopefully, Chimaev just takes over the division. At least, I think that's what the UFC wants. But we do have to get back to this card in the co-main event. Aljamain Sterling, Petr Yan. And, this leg of the parlay did not cash for me. And, I kind of deserve it because, Sterling is a very high-level fighter. The guy's proven, he's hung with the best guys in there. And honestly, I completely wrote him off in my breakdown last week. And I paid bigly for it here. Not much else to say here. I disrespected the guy, and it bit me in the ass here. I will say this, though. I do know Yan starts slow, but I didn't expect him to get backpacked for 2 rounds. But I guess that just speaks to the levels that, we're operating at here, with Sterling. Obviously, the guy is a phenomenal grappler, and, I just did not give that part of his game enough respect, based off of his first performance. But yeah, good on Sterling getting the win there. I agree with the scorecards, actually. I do agree that Sterling won that first round, and obviously he won the second and third round. So, yeah, good decision, honestly. Kind of glad that Aljo won, prove his haters wrong. So, we move along. Alexander Volkanovski, Korean Zombie. And, I had Volkanovski as my last leg of the parlay, but it didn't really matter because the Yan leg didn't cash. But I also did pick Volkanovski to win by knockout, and man, this was a pretty lopsided beating here. Volk looked sharp, but it just seemed like he was just a much quicker, bigger, stronger guy in there. And Zombie, while the guy is still pretty good, I think it's just that he's not quite at this level anymore. And honestly, it was a little sad watching that performance because it didn't look like Zombie really had anything on the feet for Volkanovski there. Volkanovski, I think, put on a pretty flawless performance. But, so, cast the knockout prop. Kind of salvaged the night a little bit there. Still ended up, losing, I think, like 3.5 units. But, definitely looking to bounce back on this card here. I already have a number of bets locked in already. And I do want to say this. I record the podcast pretty early. I do the tape pretty early. So the lines will probably have shifted from when I did the recordings, when I placed my bets. So if there's any discrepancy there, that's the reason why. And if you guys follow me on Bet MMA Tips, you'll see just exactly when I lock in the bets and at the line that I lock it in at. Anyways, we do have a pretty loaded card here, so without further ado, let's get right into the breakdowns. And moving into the next fight, we have Alateng Heili versus Kevin Croom, and Alateng's the minus 180 favorite. Comeback on Croom is plus 155. And, this is going to be a pretty low-level fight, so not one I want to get too invested in, but we'll take a look at Alateng Heili first. So, again, pretty low level, and in my opinion, Heili not really a good fighter. He's more of a counterpuncher on the feet. He does seem to have some power, but obviously he's going to be, not really putting much output. The guy really just doesn't let his hands go all that much. He does seem to have a bit of wrestling he can go to, but again, he's not really reliable to go there. We saw in his fight against Benoit and Batgirl, he really didn't go to the wrestling until round 3. So, and those are fights where, he had success in the wrestling. So I just don't know if his fight IQ's all the way there. And I think the cardio might be a little suspect as well. And honestly, I feel that Alateng should be 1-3 in the UFC, with his only win over Benoit, who's no longer with the promotion anymore and got beat by a 3-3 fighter. So really, I just don't think that Alateng's that good of a fighter. But he's going up against Kevin Croom, who, with all due respect, is a regional journeyman. He's kind of wild on the feet. He does like to push a pace and does, turn out volume in there, but I don't think there's really much process in his striking. I don't see a lot of substance in his striking either. Of course, he can land a crazy big shot, once in a while, but I don't know if he's really setting a ton of it up. I feel like a lot of the time he's just throwing stuff out there. And it does look like he can grapple a bit as well, but I don't think his wrestling is really all that good. And from what I have seen, it does look like he struggles off his back as well. On top of that, he's been knocked out and submitted a number of times on the regionals. So, Kevin Croom, I don't think he's a terrible fighter, but I just think that when he does take that step up and when he's fighting guys who are, UFC level, he tends to struggle a bit. And even against guys who aren't UFC level, he'll struggle a bit as well. But taking a look at this matchup, I definitely have to go with Alateng here. I did tape on Alateng first, and I thought it was a potential fade spot because, I'm not very high on Alateng, but then I looked into Croom and kind of just thought better of it. Croom's path to victory here is probably to just maybe win a volume-based decision, just constantly be working in there, throwing out output, and maybe just weasel his way to a decision, but I don't know if that's super likely. It definitely is a live outcome, but I just don't think it's something that'll happen at a crazy high clip because, something that I did want to mention for this fight is that Croom is going to be moving down to 135, and, I don't know if that's a great move for him because Croom is not really like a size bully in there. He's more of like a volume output cardio bully, and he's pulling it off against, I'd say, lower level guys as well. Alateng, again, not the highest level, but he is a big hitter, and, I do think with how reckless Croom can get, I think that Heile's going to be able to land some pretty big shots on him, maybe even put him out because, moving down to 135, we're going to see Croom's already shaky chin potentially be diminished even more. And if we see Alateng really sit down on some of his shots, or if he decides to blitz Croom at any point, he could land a big enough shot to put him out, or at least do enough damage to really swing the rounds in his way. And of course, there is a potential wrestling path. Alateng, not the most reliable to go there, but I do think if he's able to take Croom down, he could just control him there. Because we saw Kelleher, move up to 145 and be able to take Croom down multiple occasions, get good amount of control time off on him. And obviously Kelleher is, I think, a much more well-rounded fighter than Alateng, but, Alateng is still a pretty, strong physical guy, and Croom moving down to 135, if he's diminished at all, I think that, Alateng shouldn't have too much trouble taking him down. So, even if this fight does go to a decision, I don't necessarily favor Croom to get it done. I think that the big power shots of Alateng can sway rounds, and I do think that if he's able to hit takedowns as well, that could potentially win minutes for him also. So, while I'm not super high on Alateng here, I do think he should be able to get it done. And overall, I'm just not really sold on Croom's move down to 135 at this stage in his career. The durability has always been somewhat shaky, and he's getting a little late in his career also. So the move down, I think, is potentially a bit more detrimental than it is beneficial for him. So give me Alateng in the spot. I think he gets it done by knockout. I think he knocks out Kevin Croom. And in the next fight, we have Istela Nunes versus Sam Hughes. And Nunes is the minus 190 favorite. Come back on Hughes is plus 165. And we'll start with the underdog in Hughes first. So Hughes, she's a pretty scrappy fighter in there. Generally is somewhat aggressive. She will move forward and throw down. She will work the jab occasionally and throw some kicks in there, but can definitely get sucked into a brawl. And I do think that Hughes is pretty hittable in general. Overall, though, I really don't think that Hughes is that good of a fighter. She's kind of plotty, kind of hittable. Her striking really isn't all that great either. However, she is pretty tough and she will move forward, and she does seem to have a bit of power as well, which, generally can get you pretty far in women's MMA. But, I think against more skilled fighters, she's going to struggle quite a bit. And she's going to be going up against Nunes, who is got a Muay Thai base. The striking is actually quite good from her. I think, she's very sharp, very aggressive in there. Does have a nice kicking game as well. Pretty strong in the clinch, very vicious knees and elbows in the clinch. She does seem to throw with intent as well. Plenty of zip in her shots. Overall, I do think she's actually a pretty good fighter. There are a few concerns that I have with her, though. One, I do think that her submission defense is still a little shaky. Both of her losses are by submission. One way back in the day against Lee, but that was somewhat early in her career, and Lee is a pretty solid grappler in her own right. So I kind of give her a pass there. But the Carnelossi fight was a little concerning. It just looked like Carnelossi was able to snatch up her neck pretty quickly there, and she didn't do a great job defending, didn't have great awareness in that situation as well. So a little bit of a concern, but she was doing pretty good against Carnelossi, all things considered, up until that point. And prior to her UFC debut, she was, I think, a little low volume, which, I had some concerns with. But, coming into that fight against Carnelossi in her debut, she showed that, she could definitely let her hands go. So I'm not as concerned now. And, going into this matchup, I don't know if that's going to be as big of an issue, because I do think that in this matchup, Nunes is the much better striker. And with how hittable Hughes is, I don't think Nunes will have any issue, letting her hands go. But as far as my prediction for this fight, I think that Istela just absolutely lights Sam Hughes up. I don't know what else to say. I think Sam Hughes is going to get lit up here. And I'm actually pretty confident in that, because I do believe there's a pretty big skill gap in terms of the striking on the feet here. So I do think this is a pretty solid spot for Istela here. Even at minus 200, I'm probably going to bet it. It does look like a little money's come in on Hughes, actually, so I'm going to wait and see where this line goes, but by the time this episode airs, I'll probably have a decent-sized bet placed on Istela already, and I know a lot of people aren't super keen on just laying chalk, especially at, low-level women's MMA, and, I completely understand it here, but I don't know if it's necessarily true in this matchup here, because I don't think Hughes is UFC caliber, whereas with Istela, I do think that she's got, top 15 potential, so I can see why some people will think this line is kind of wide, but I just honestly don't see too many paths to victory here for Hughes. Let's just take a look at how Hughes can potentially win here. I don't think she's going to be able to win in the striking, so she's going to have to look to wrestle and out-grapple Nunes in this spot, and that is a little bit of a concern, because when there is this big of a gap, in the striking, you kind of expect one fighter to really sell out in the wrestling and the grappling, and that can make a fight very very hairy. But I just don't know if Hughes is going to have that much success there, because I really don't think Hughes is that good of a grappler. She hasn't really shown good wrestling or grappling in any of her fights. She wasn't able to take Loma down, and Loma was actually able to hit some sweeps against Hughes. And on top of that, Loma was doing some work in the clinch as well, hitting her with some knees and some elbows. And Loma is an atom weight, essentially, and I do think that in this fight, we can see Istela do the same thing. Istela is going to be, I think, much better in the clinch as well. And while Nunes did get taken down a number of times against Carnelossi, she did a pretty good job of working her way back up, and she was able to volume up Carnelossi whenever it was on the feet. And Carnelossi, in my opinion, is just a much more physical fighter than Hughes. I think Carnelossi is probably a better grappler than Hughes as well. So I don't think Hughes is going to have as much success as Carnelossi did. And even if she was, I do think that we see Nunes, be able to work her way back up, keep the fight standing and do enough damage on the feet to win a decision here. And without hittable Hughes, I wouldn't even be surprised if Nunes got a knockout here in the spot. So yeah, I do like Nunes quite a bit in this spot here. I think she either wins a pretty dominant or pretty clear decision here, or she may even get the knockout. So give me Nunes in this spot. And moving along, we have Trey Ogden versus Jordan Leavitt. And Ogden's the minus 135 favorite comeback on. Leavitt is plus 115. And we'll start with the UFC newcomer in Ogden. And Ogden, he is predominantly a grappler. I think his striking is somewhat limited. I've seen him look to work the jab in there and just stay busy with leg kicks, but generally he's looking to get the fight to the ground. And, he does seem to have pretty good timing on his entries. His topside grappling is solid. And he is someone who will look for submissions as well. And he has gotten a number of submissions also on the regionals. Granted, it's some lower level guys that he's submitting in there. And, I will have to say this as well. I have seen him reversed by lower level guys, get his back taken and such. And, he's been submitted a couple times as well. So a little concerning in that regards because, despite him being a pretty grapple heavy fighter, he does seem to make some mistakes in there. And, it's concerning because he's going to be going up against Leavitt, who is a grappler as well. With Leavitt, his striking is pretty awkward, but, Leavitt is someone who is pretty consistent with being able to work in his grappling. He likes to attack the single leg and will jump guard if he needs to as well. I do think that Leavitt is deceptively strong in there. He's able to pick up guys a lot of the time and just slam him. So, I do think the guy's got some sneaky strength in there. He's pretty slippery on the mat. He does have some pretty crafty submissions as well. Honestly, this is, I think, a pretty weird fight. On the feet, I do favor Ogden a little bit more. I think he's got the better frame for striking. He seems a little more comfortable there. And again, with Leavitt, he does seem a little awkward with the striking, seems a bit non-committal with some of the strikes that he throws, and it does look like he gets off balance sometimes. So striking, I do favor Ogden a little bit more. However, the grappling does get a little interesting because I do think that both guys, generally prefer to be on top. The wrestling, I might favor Ogden a little bit more as well, but I do think that on the mat, Leavitt, he's a little craftier, a little more slippery, and I do think in general maybe his grappling is a little bit better than Ogden. And cardio-wise, I do favor Ogden as well. We've seen him gone the distance, not look too gassed in there, and those were pretty high-paced grappling fights. Whereas with Leavitt, we have seen him slow down considerably after that first round. He dropped the second and third round against Poyes. And even in his fight against Sales, he was really huffing and puffing in there after that first round, but was able to pull off the submission in the second. But I did feel that Leavitt was starting to slow pretty significantly in that fight. So I kind of do favor Ogden in this fight, especially if it does go the distance. I think that his cardio should be able to carry him, in that second and third round. But overall, this is a pretty volatile fight to me because I do think that this will largely take place in the grappling, and it will be pretty back and forth, pretty sloppy. And I can kind of see it playing out similar to the Leavitt-Poyes fight where, we see a lot of control time for both guys and really not too much going on. We've seen Ogden just get reversed on multiple occasions on the regionals. We've seen him submitted before. So I do think that someone like Leavitt, who's got, pretty solid grappling, could give Ogden some troubles on the mat. But, if Leavitt isn't able to submit Ogden, I can definitely see Ogden getting enough top control time to win a decision as well. So, this is a tough fight to call in that regards, but I got to side with Ogden here as far as a pick goes. I think he's a little more comfortable on the feet. So, if he's able to keep this fight standing, I do kind of favor him there a little bit more. And, he's going to be a little more physical. I think in the grappling exchanges, I think his cardio is a little bit better. So for those reasons, I got to side with Ogden. Not supremely confident, though, because, again, I do think this is going to be a pretty sloppy fight. And at the end of the day, I'm just not super sold on the grappling of Ogden either. But I'll pick him for this fight. Pretty easy pass for me, honestly. I don't really see too much value in either side here. Give me Ogden to win by decision. And in the next fight, we have lower level heavyweight fight between Martin Buday and Chris Barnett. Buday's the minus 160 favorite. Comeback on Barnett is plus 140. And we'll start with the underdog in Barnett. So second fight in the UFC for him. Or third fight, actually. But with Barnett, he is a bit of a meme fighter, if I'm being honest. He's a fan favorite. He's doing, backflips and he's dancing in there. And if you kind of just look at him as a fighter, I do think he's somewhat limited. He's got, pretty quick hands, I guess, for the division. He's got some power, and of course he does have, some pretty flashy spinning attacks in there, but by and large, I do feel he's kind of knockout or bust. His style is, I think, very finish reliant, but, if you look at the guys he's finishing on the regionals lately, it's really not all that impressive. It's against lower level guys. Back in the day, he does have a few decent wins, but that was a little while ago, and, if we're looking at recent wins, it's really not all that impressive. And let's not forget, he was actually losing his fight to John Vellante before he landed that spinning wheel kick. So, not a great look. Obviously, it's good that he won, but he was pretty much relegated to just throwing some leg kicks that fight against John Vellante of all people. And then, of course, he did get finished by Rothwell in the fight prior, but not sure if that's going to have too much bearing on this fight because Rothwell is a UFC veteran at that point, and he was giving up a ton of size in that fight also. So, pretty interesting matchup here because he's going to be going up against Buday, who, when I first taped him, it was actually against this old guy, and it was primarily a striking affair. And honestly, Buday did not look good at all in that fight. He was getting pressured. He was getting tagged up. Didn't really have much to offer on the feet. And he did ultimately get the knockout in that fight, but it was still somewhat suspect because basically Buday just lands a jab on his opponent, and the guy just folds up and is pretty much shelled up on his way down. So kind of a suspect fight there. And, up until then, it wasn't even like he was doing all that well. So I was very suspicious of Buday coming in. Thought it'd be a potential fade here, but it looked like that fight might have just been a bit of an outlier because I watched some of his other fights, and he's generally looking to grapple, looking to clinch up with his opponents, land heavy shots against him. And so maybe his fight IQ is a little suspect, but from what I have seen, the guy is extremely strong. He does seem to have some power in there as well. Obviously in his Contender Series fight, he was just landing some brutal knees against this big guy's thigh, and it looked like it was doing quite a bit of damage. So it does look like Buday is able to generate quite a bit of force with his shots. Looks like he's able to just maul a lot of the guys in the clinch, get him down to the ground and just pound on him. So if this guy's able to get his hands on his opponents, could be a lot of trouble for him. However, the stand-up for Buday is really not good. His striking is pretty rudimentary, but the thing is, he's also very hittable. He was eating shots on the regionals. He was eating shots on the Contender Series. It does seem to have a pretty solid chin, though, because that guy on the Contender Series did look like he was throwing some heat, against Buday, but Buday was able to kind of just bite down and eventually just get the guy in the clinch and just start doing damage to him. So Buday, pretty tough guy, pretty strong as well. But taking a look at this matchup, I definitely do have to favor Buday, especially if he decides to grapple, because I think he's just going to be the much more physical guy in there. Barnett, at the end of the day, is not really a heavyweight. He's got more of like a middleweight or light heavyweight frame, whereas with Buday, he is a bit, chunky for a heavyweight as well, but I do think his frame is a little more suitable for the division. And in addition to that, Barnett's cardio has not looked really all that good. Buday, still a question mark as well, but I do think that if he's the one, pressing the action, if he's the one getting the grappling going, if he's the one on top, then I suspect the cardio of Barnett's going to drain much faster. So I do think that Buday should be able to take this matchup here, especially if, this fight is, taking place in the clinch or on the ground. Barnett could potentially land something big while standing, but Buday's shown a pretty crazy chin. So if he's able to eat some of those shots and get his grappling going, he should be able to win the fight. But again, you can't really trust Buday here, but I do think that if he could get the grappling going, he could look like a pretty heavy favorite. So I'm probably going to take a small shot on Buday. Nothing crazy, because at the end of the day, Buday does seem to have, somewhat questionable fight IQ. I wouldn't be completely surprised if he just decided to stand and strike with Barnett here. And, Barnett does seem to have a bit of power. He is pretty quick in there, and Buday is pretty hittable. So we could potentially see Barnett hit a big shot and, put Buday out, but I don't think it's super likely here. I do think that Buday should be able to get his wrestling going, should be able to take Barnett down and likely pound him out there. So give me Buday in the spot, and give me Buday by round 2 knockout. And in the next fight, we have Jesse Ronson versus Rafa García, and Garcia is the minus 140 favorite. Come back on Ronson is plus 120, and we'll start with Ronson, the underdog. So with Ronson, pretty straightforward guy. He's mainly just looking to strike in there. likes to just stalk opponents, back them down, just throw heavy against him. And Ronson, he does seem to have a bit of power, lots of regional knockouts, and is coming off of a club and sub victory over Nicholas Dalby. So, the guy I don't think is some elite striker or anything, but he does seem to have a bit of power. And I would say overall he's probably on the higher end in terms of regional talent. And he's going to be going up against García, who is, I think, in a pretty similar situation, top of the food chain on the regionals, but does seem to struggle a bit at the UFC level. And honestly, I think the best way to really describe García here is that he's a really just tough, gritty fighter who will just move forward and, just consistently put out volume and have some sort of work rate where, whether he's looking to strike or just looking to wrestle or just look to fight in the clinch, he's constantly just looking to do something in there. And I do think that overall he's a pretty active fighter, pretty tough, pretty strong in there. But overall, I don't think he's particularly great. He's just able to really mix it in and just make a fight really just, grindy and gritty in there. Cardio-wise, I just don't know quite what to think of García. His body language honestly looks terrible after the first round. The guy is huffing and puffing in there, and the movement looks, generally pretty labored after that first round, but he does a really good job of fighting through it. We saw it in the Levy fight. We saw it in the Gritzmacher fight. And even on the regionals, he doesn't look good after that first round, but he is able to consistently pull these wins out and get it done. And, I don't know if he's going to be able to keep getting away with it, especially now that he's, taking that step up in competition. And for this matchup, I do think that he's going to struggle a bit because, Ronson is a pretty solid fighter, honestly. He's getting a bit up there in age. And something to note in this fight is, he's actually going to be moving down to lightweight in this fight, I think for the first time in 4 or 5 years. So as of right now, on Tapology, it says the fight is at 170, but, I checked on the UFC website and it looks like it's actually at lightweight. So it looks like Ronson is actually moving down, which definitely is concerning a little bit, right? So you have to wonder, how the weight cut's going to affect his cardio, how it's going to affect his durability. And of course, moving down a weight class, you do have to factor in, the guys he's going up against are going to be a little quicker as well. And on top of that, Ronson is, I believe, 36, a little up there in age. Guys a little older moving down in weight class, I think is a bit concerning as well. So a lot of potential red flags on the Ronson end. The guy I think is coming off of a PED suspension as well. So I don't really know the details on that. I do know that his last fight got overturned, but outside of that, I really don't know what the repercussions were for that. So, moving along, I did actually want to address some of these concerns really quickly. So, right off the bat, the cardio I do think is a legit concern here. I don't know how that's going to affect him. The durability, another concern. But to kind of counter that a little bit, Garcia is not exactly the biggest power puncher either. I don't know if Garcia's really got any finishes either. And historically, Ronson has been pretty durable. He's only been knocked out twice. I want to say once really early in his career and once in the PFL against a pretty solid fighter. So overall, I don't think Ronson is chinny or anything. And for the sake of this matchup, I don't think the durability should be too big of an issue here. And then, of course, the speed concern, Rafa García, not exactly the quickest hands in there. So not something that I think should be too big of an issue. And on top of that, García does seem to slow down, quite a bit after that first round. So I don't know if that'll be much of an issue, going into that second and third round. So the biggest concern for me in Ronson moving down is going to be how his cardio is going to hold up. Ronson has shown pretty good cardio on the regionals. He's gone to decision on numerous occasions. He's gone 5 rounds before as well. So I do think his cardio, generally is okay. So if it holds up here, I think he should be fine. So for those reasons, I got to go with Ronson here. He's going to be the much bigger, more physical guy in there. Obviously, he's going to be much more powerful as well. I think that Ronson's probably going to be the biggest hitter that Garcia's fought. So, I think that Ronson, he should be able to get the W here. He's going to be the better striker. I think if his cardio holds up, and that's, I think, a pretty big if, right? If it holds up, García won't be able to implement his, clinch game, his wrestling game as effectively. And if he's forced to strike with Ronson, I do favor Ronson, somewhat significantly there. I think there's going to be a bit of a level gap between them in terms of the striking. I think that Ronson should be able to touch García up. García is pretty hittable. I think he might be able to get the knockout. García has shown a pretty good chin so far, but again, Ronson's going to be one of the biggest hitters he's fought. So I do think the knockout is live for Ronson here. But even if he doesn't get the knockout, I do think he could likely just outstrike García to a pretty competitive decision. I think García is going to be landing some of his own shots, and he might be able to get a little bit of control time, in the clinch and stuff. But I do think that over the course of 3 rounds, we see Ronson just do a little more damage and get the decision win, if not just get the knockout. So I do like Ronson in this spot. I don't think he should be an underdog. He's fought, I think, much better competition. He's looked better against, much better guys. He did fight Kevin Lee and Prezeras and somebody else. I'm blanking on the name right now, but he did take him to a split decision, survive those grappling exchanges. So I think that as long as Ronson hasn't regressed significantly, during his time off, as long as his cardio is okay here, I think he should be able to do work against García. But yeah, I did bet a couple of units on Ronson here. I really don't think he should be an underdog. I think he should be more of like a slight favorite. Obviously, I'm assuming the weight cut's not going to be too big of an issue because, the last time we saw, a big name cut down in Dan Hooker, he obviously struggled, but again, a little different situation here. He's going up against a much better fighter in Allen, and I thought the speed was going to be a big issue in that fight for him. I don't think the speed's going to be too big of an issue here for Ronson. So, yeah, I got to go with Ronson in this spot. I think Ronson either gets it done by knockout or decision. I like him as an underdog. And moving along into the next fight, we have Drakkar Klose versus Brandon Jenkins. And Klose is the minus 350 favorite. Comeback on Jenkins is plus 270. And we'll start with the underdog in Jenkins first. So, from what I have seen on tape of this guy, he does look to primarily be a striker. He's got a very loose style, hands low, looking to feint and move his way in. The output is okay, but it doesn't really look like he puts a ton behind his shots. It looks like he's generally looking to just set up some, pretty low percentage moves like, spinning elbows, jump knees. And, he is pulling them off at a somewhat high clip on the regionals, but I just don't know if it's really going to convert at the UFC level. And defensively, he is pretty hittable. I've seen him struggle a bit with leg kicks as well. The takedown defense and defensive grappling overall is not really good either. I mean, the guy made Rongzhu look like a decent wrestler, probably tricked a lot of people into thinking Rongzhu was a decent fighter, honestly. But look, Rongzhu, not really UFC caliber, and honestly, neither is Jenkins. And Jenkins, he's going to be going up against Klose, who I do think is a UFC level fighter. Klose, very solid, well-rounded fighter in general. Klose, he is a pretty physical guy in there. He does seem to have a bit of power. Does have a very heavy leg kick that he likes to go to. But I feel like he does his best work in the clinch when he's, cage pushing, just grinding on opponents, racking up control time, and occasionally doing a bit of damage to him. Overall, though, he's not the most exciting fighter, honestly. And personally, I'm not really a fan of his style. It's pretty boring, and he does generally fight pretty close, no pun intended. But I will say this, though, he is fighting close against UFC level guys like Giagos, Venata, Bobby Green, and DKC, all wins that have aged pretty well, honestly. And at the end of the day, what really matters is that he is actually winning these fights. So, they're close fights, but they're against UFC level guys, and he is winning them. So his style, very boring, but it is pretty effective. And I just don't see it being too much or being too different here, honestly. I think Klose could realistically just get it done any way he wants. I think he should be able to handle Jenkins here. Jenkins is pretty much knockout or bust, and not even like a traditional knockout. I think he's going to have to land one of his crazy, spinning elbows or jump knees or something, which I think are pretty low percentage. Like, realistically, I don't even know how likely, that outcome is. Maybe like 15%, maybe even less, because I really don't think he's landing that at a very high clip at the UFC level, if you know what I mean. But Klose, he should be able to get it done at distance. I do think that leg kicks are going to be a big factor here. I think he could definitely do a bit of damage to the lead leg of Jenkins. I've seen Jenkins, get wobbled before on the regionals from leg kicks. They gave him a lot of trouble. I think that Klose, if he's able to get his hands on Jenkins, should be able to bully him in the clinch, maybe take him down. Klose, he does have some wrestling he's shown he could go to. I just think that Klose is going to be the much more physical guy in there. Klose generally is a decisionator, but I can definitely see him get a finish here because, if guys like Rongzhu and Mark Breeden are able to get the finish on Jenkins, I do think that Klose can probably do it as well. So official pick for me is obviously going to be Klose here. I don't know how he's going to get it done, but I do think he's got multiple paths to victory here. I think he could either grind Jenkins out to a decision. I think he could possibly knock Jenkins out. I know Klose hasn't really shown a ton of power in the UFC, but he's fighting some pretty decent guys in there. He was able to hurt Dariush pretty badly on the feet, so I do think Klose has got some power. He just doesn't really ever show it that much in his fights. He's content to kind of just coast. But I do think this is going to be an easy enough matchup that the finish is live. I think he could potentially find the submission as well. So, yeah, I like Klose in this spot. I'm probably going to look to parlay him. Not sure if I'll play the decision prop or the inside the distance prop. It'll really depend on what the odds are for those. So, yeah, I like Klose here to get it done. I honestly don't see Breeden or Jenkins winning this. He's going to have to land some crazy shot here. So give me Klose. Give me Klose by any way he likes. And in the next fight, we have Pannie Kianzad versus Lina Länsberg. And Kianzad's the minus 300 favorite. Comeback on Länsberg is plus 250. And we'll start with the big underdog in Länsberg first. So with Länsberg, she does have a pretty extensive Muay Thai background, a number of accolades prior to her MMA career. But her fighting style, I think, is pretty straightforward. I'd say 95% of her fights are either in the clinch or on the ground, whether she's winning or losing. Either she's just clinch fucking her way to a decision, or she's getting dominated in the grappling. And that's pretty much Länsberg in a nutshell here. And she is going to be going up against Kianzad, who is predominantly a striker. Pretty good volume on the feet, good output, good pace and pressure. Does seem to be pretty physical for the division as well, but there definitely are some concerns going into this fight. Because, I have seen Kianzad struggle in the clinch, and I've seen her struggle off her back, which does play into Länsberg's game. Länsberg is either looking to take fights to the ground or is looking to clinch up with opponents. But, I do have to say for this matchup, Länsberg is coming off of a 2-year-long layoff. She had a kid. She is 40 years old. So, lots of red flags, in that regards. And something, you do want to consider as well is, Kianzad has struggled a bit in the clinch historically. And it was against, pretty good fighters like Raquel Pennington, who was in the prime of her career and is also a top 5, top 10 fighter. And, I will say this, that first round, I do think that Kianzad did win that first round, and she was showing some good defense there. She wasn't completely lost there, and she did end up winning that first round. It really was just the takedowns and the top control time that Pennington was able to get, in the second and third rounds that won her that fight. However, the bottom game of Kianzad definitely still a concern here. We did see Pennington obviously have a lot of success on top, and even Eubanks in their fight. But the thing with Länsberg is, while she can work in the clinch, while she has shown she could hit takedowns, I just don't know if they're going to be as effective at this stage in her career. And you look at the fighters that Länsberg has had success against, Macy Chiasson, who is honestly looking like a bit of a bust at this point. Tanya Evinger, no longer with the promotion. Gina Mazzani, a known gasser. Lucy Pudilova, also no longer with the promotion. So, not the best batch of fighters that Länsberg's beaten. And I don't know if I'd necessarily classify Kianzad as in the same category as these fighters, essentially. Honestly, I'd say Kianzad's a little closer in terms of the skill level to someone like Kunitskaya than the likes of Mazzani or Tanya Evinger. However, there are still enough stylistic concerns in this fight for me to stay away from wanting to lay the juice on Kianzad, because minus 300 is just a little ridiculous given how often we've seen Kianzad struggle against the cage and off her back. So I wouldn't be completely shocked or anything if we see Länsberg just, grind out a couple of rounds doing what she usually does. But, at the end of the day, I just can't really trust either fighter. I definitely can't trust Kianzad, at this price. And, Länsberg coming back from the long layoff, 40 years old, I just can't quite trust her in this spot. And historically, a lot of fighters that have been able to take her down in control or take Länsberg down in control or, have had a lot of success against her. Kianzad, not a prolific wrestler by any means. But I do think that, she's maybe big and physical enough and, youthful enough to potentially pull it off. So I got to go with Kianzad in this spot, but, pretty low confidence in both fighters. But I just got to go with the fighter that's, on a bit of a streak, the fighter that's, much younger in her career. So give me Kianzad. Give me Kianzad by decision. And moving along, we have Devin Clark versus William Knight, and Clark is the minus 170 favorite. Comeback on Knight is plus 145. And this is a pretty straightforward fight, in my opinion. Clark, he's primarily a wrestler. He's got pretty good takedowns, pretty explosive with them. The striking is serviceable at this point in his career. I don't know if he's going to be winning too many stand-up fights, but he does a really good job of mixing in the takedowns, racking up control time, and just really mixing it all together to win pretty clear decisions. And with Clark, he is a bit of a decisionator. I believe all of his wins in the UFC so far have been by decision, and his cardio does seem to check out. So, he is able to mix in the wrestling for all 3 rounds and not just completely gas himself out. The durability seems okay. He's been finished a couple of times, but, he has also eaten some pretty big bombs from guys like Menifield and was still able to fight through it. So I don't think his chin's cracked or anything, but, there definitely are some concerns because he's going up against William Knight, who is a pretty big hitter. But the thing with Knight is I just don't think he's that good of a fighter. Knight, in my opinion, is someone who has kind of gotten by with just being a very big physical guy in there. And, the guy definitely is a freak athlete. He's just an absolute brick house in there. But, I don't know if he's got a real discernible skill set. He's got big power, and he's able to bully guys with it in certain fights. But I feel that if you are able to match him in the athleticism and you do have, like, a good skill set, then you're probably going to be able to beat someone like Knight. And I definitely do think that Clark is, a good enough wrestler that he should be able to take Knight down. Either control him there or maybe even get a finish. Does seem kind of unlikely because Clark, isn't really someone with a lot of killer instinct, isn't someone who will usually hunt the finish. Knight, he does have big power on the feet, and he does have some, pretty heavy leg kicks. So I do think he could give Clark some troubles on the feet, but I don't see Clark entertaining the striking for too long. I think Clark is just going to get the fight to the ground as soon as possible, where I think he has a massive advantage. Obviously, Dao Jung was able to just hit the same sweep over and over on Knight and just lay on top of him for 3 rounds. I definitely think Knight could do that, or I think Clark could do that. And honestly, if someone like Cody Brundage was able to take Knight down, take his back, flatten him out, all within like a minute, I think that Clark could do something similar, right? I don't know how good the grappling of Clark is, but I do think that Clark should be able to get the fight to the ground at a minimum. And honestly, that Brundage fight was actually very sketchy because, Brundage did have the back of Knight for a good chunk of that first round, but Herb Dean just had a really questionable stand-up. Well, not a stand-up, but, he threatened to stand him up because nothing was really going on. It looked like Knight was just holding on to the wrist of Brundage, not letting him do anything. And, Herb Dean was just rushing him to get to work in there. And I think Brundage kind of panicked a bit and ended up giving up position. But, I think that if Brundage is able to do that, I definitely think that Knight should be able to, or Clark should be able to take Knight down. At least lay in his guard, grind him out for 3 rounds, possibly get the finish as well. It's kind of weird because I do think that if Clark goes for it, he could potentially find the finish. But on the other hand, I'm watching his fight against Daquan Townsend, and Townsend's, a really bad fighter. Basically, Clark had him down, all 3 rounds. And just really wasn't rushing for the finish. He was content to just ride him out for 3 rounds. And I could definitely see that happening here. Again, him just playing it safe, not really risking it because, if he does posture up or does anything, Knight potentially could just explode out. He might just lay on top of him and grind him out for 15 minutes. So the pick here is Clark for me. I might just bet him small here. I do think the wrestling should be able to get it done for him. Obviously, Knight does have big power. He could knock Clark out, but I'd say outside of just landing a big shot against Clark, I think Clark should be able to win minutes in this fight. So give me Clark by decision. And in the next fight, we have Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos versus Mounir Lazzez, and Zaleski's the minus 205 favorite. Comeback on Lazzez is plus 175. And this should be a pretty exciting fight. Could potentially be a banger, but we'll start with Dos Santos. The guy is a veteran level striker. He's got really good striking in there, great footwork, good movement. Overall, just a very dynamic striker. He's got a good kicking game as well. We'll mix in the occasional spinning attack. Overall, I do think that Zaleski is a pretty dangerous striker. And of course, he is coming off of a very solid, very dominant performance over Benoit Saint-Denis. Basically just beat him pillar to post all 3 rounds. Possibly could have gotten the stoppage in the second round there. Obviously, it didn't materialize, but it was a very strong performance by Zaleski. That said, though, I did feel like he was looking a little slow in there. Even before that second round where he really unloaded the clip on Benoit Saint-Denis, like even in the first round, I felt that Zaleski wasn't as sharp as he used to be. And, maybe it's just me. I could be wrong here, but I do think that Zaleski is starting to slow down a little bit. Now, I don't know if he's really fallen off a cliff or, I definitely wouldn't say he's, washed or anything, but I do think that there is a bit of decline going on with Zaleski. And something to note, though, is that, while he is coming off of a really good performance against Saint-Denis, Saint-Denis is still a very green fighter. I believe Saint-Denis had only started MMA like 2 or 3 years ago, and Saint-Denis is actually more of a grappler. So Zaleski, while he is coming off of a good performance, he kind of just did what we all more or less expected him to do in there. And, he's going up against Lazzez, who is still somewhat early in his career, but I do think that Lazzez is a much more competent striker than Saint-Denis, and I do think maybe he's a little more well-rounded as well. Lazzez, he is predominantly a striker. We have seen him wrestle a little bit, but most of his fights do play out a majority of the time on the feet. Lazzez, he's got a really good frame to the division. He uses his length pretty well also. He's got a good jab, 1-2. Really good use of the kicks as well. Overall, I consider him more of like a volume striker. He's out there just pumping out output. The cardio is really solid as well. And, I know he's coming off of a finished loss, but, historically, I do think he's been pretty durable. And it was a body shot that finished him by Alves, who is a pretty big hitter himself. But taking a look at this matchup, I kind of like Lazzez here, especially at, this big dog number. Maybe I'm reading into what I think is Zaleski's decline here, but I do feel that he doesn't quite have the quickness and the athleticism that he used to have. I feel like his dynamic style is a bit reliant on him, or a bit reliant on his speed and athleticism. And, if you watch his fights, his fight against Salikov and even his fight against Li Jingliang, you start to see that, the speed and the quickness and just how sharp he is overall in the cage is just not quite there anymore. I mean, the guy still is a very skilled fighter and he still seems to have some power, but I do think that his game is starting to fall off a little bit here. And again, maybe I'm looking in this a little too much, but I do think that is enough of a concern here where I definitely wouldn't really recommend laying, the minus 200 on Zaleski. And overall, I do consider Zaleski a bit more of a finisher. I think that he is somewhat finish reliant. I know he's been to a decision a number of times, but I feel like he does his best when he's able to get his opponents out of there, or he looks his best when he's able to get his opponents out of there. And I just don't know if he's going to be able to finish Lazzez. He might be. Lazzez is obviously coming off of a TKO finish, so Zaleski, big power, very explosive, very dynamic striker, could get Lazzez out of there, but I do feel that if it goes to a decision, I think that Lazzez could definitely take it there. Because we look at some of the decisions that Zaleski has gone to, and they're actually pretty contentious. So just taking a look real quick, obviously we have the Salikov fight, split decision loss, a fight that he arguably should have won. But, you look at the Konchenko fight, very close as well. He won, I think, a close fight. I don't know if it was a split decision, but I do think a lot of people scored it for Konchenko in that fight. Same with the Lyman Good fight, another split decision win. Very contentious. A lot of people thought Good won that fight, and same with the Dalby fight as well, another split decision win. So I do think that if it goes to a decision, it's probably going to be pretty close. And in my opinion, if it does go there, I think that Lazzez has got a pretty decent chance of winning. Lazzez, he is pretty tough. He is someone who will move forward and throw volume, and I do think that at this stage in their career, he might be a little quicker as well. I think that if it goes to decision, I think the striking optics might favor Lazzez a little bit more. And on top of that, Lazzez has shown a little bit of offensive wrestling as well. I don't know if he'll have too much success there, but I do think that if it's something that he'll mix in, it'll definitely help him, in scoring points and definitely keeping Zaleski guessing as well. But, at the end of the day, Lazzez is a moderate-sized underdog, so I don't know if I have to make too many points for him. But I just think that if it goes to a decision, which I favor it to, I think that Lazzez could pull it off here. So I'm going to go with Lazzez here to pick up the upset. I think he could probably win like a 29-28, very close, contentious decision. But give me Lazzez in this spot. I think Lazzez gets it done by decision here. And in the next fight, we have Pat Sabatini versus TJ Laramie. And Sabatini's the minus 350 favorite. Come back on Laramie is plus 285. And we'll start with the big underdog in Laramie first. So Laramie, he is primarily a wrestler. However, overall, I feel his game is still pretty green. The striking is, I'd say, somewhat serviceable. He's looking to close the distance. He's throwing a lot of winging shots in there. But he's still, I think, a pretty aggressive wrestler. And he is built like your prototypical wrestler as well, right? Short, stocky, wide back. He's very explosive in there. It's quite strong, and he does seem to have, pretty good timing on that level change. The cardio seems to check out as well, right? I've seen him go the distance in numerous fights. I've seen him, fight in 5-rounders as well. But overall, I do still think his game is still somewhat one-dimensional. He still is very reliant to have to hit takedowns in fights. And, I just don't know if he can have too much success in there because he's going up against Pat Sabatini, who, Sabatini is primarily a grappler, but I do think his striking is going to be a bit better in this spot here. He's got pretty decent footwork in there. Really good movement in fades. I've seen him just throw spinning attacks in there as well. But of course, he is pretty reliable to go to the wrestling and the grappling. The guy's wrestling, as we saw in his most recent fight, is actually pretty solid. Even if he isn't able to get the takedowns, I've seen him just, push opponents against the cage, work the knees, and occasionally, look to try and trip opponents there as well. And, on top, he does look to consolidate control, work the ground and pound occasionally to stay busy and look to create openings. Of course, the guy's very slick there as well with the submissions. He'll look for them if the opportunity presents itself. And we did see in his most recent fight, he's content to kind of just lay in a dominant position for 3 rounds and just win a fight that way as well. On top of that, the guy's got solid cardio, gone the distance in a lot of his fights. And he's pushing a pretty heavy grappling pace as well. But taking a look at this matchup, I definitely have to pick Sabatini here. No crazy hot takes or anything. I just think that Sabatini is pretty much the better fighter everywhere. You could maybe say that Laramie's, the better wrestler. But, Sabatini, pretty solid wrestler himself. I think Sabatini's the better grappler also. Sabatini, I think, the better striker as well. So I feel for Laramie, his really only path to victory is to be able to hit multiple takedowns and secure, 2 or 3 minutes of control time in each of the rounds for him to win a decision. And I just don't know if that's too likely here. He may be able to hit takedowns, but I don't know if he's going to be able to hold Sabatini down. And, I definitely think that Sabatini could probably hit some takedowns of his own, maybe get on top, get into a dominant position, maybe even find the submission. But I just like Sabatini in this spot here. I think he's pretty much the better fighter everywhere. Got him covered in most spots here. So I like Sabatini here. This is going to be a pretty tough fight for Laramie. And I don't think he's going to get destroyed or anything, but I do think that we see Sabatini either win a decision here or get the submission. I'm leaning towards a decision. Laramie does seem, pretty, or at least competent enough on the ground to be able to survive some of the grappling exchanges. And maybe he's able to work in some of the wrestling and be able to stall the fight out a little bit. But I got to go with Sabatini by decision. And in the next fight, we have Mayra Bueno Silva versus Wu Yanan. And Silva's the minus 350 favorite comeback on. Yanan is plus 285. And we'll start with Silva first, who I think is a pretty interesting fighter. She's got pretty good grappling, pretty slick submissions off her back. But overall, her submissions are pretty opportunistic. She generally does prefer to strike in there. And on the feet, she does actually hit pretty hard. Really likes to sit down on those kicks, whether she's going to the body or the leg. She's definitely thrown with a bit of heat with those kicks. She's got some pretty nasty knees in the clinch as well. Overall, I do think she's one of the heavier hitters in the division. Of course, there are some concerns that I have on the Silva side. She is pretty hittable. She is kind of content to trade with opponents. And, while she is a somewhat slick submission grappler off her back, she can get stuck there. She will throw up submissions, but, she will give up a ton of control time. I think we saw that a bit in the Fiorot fight, and we saw that in the Moreau's fight as well. So, if she isn't able to snatch up that armbar or that triangle, she could give up a lot of control time off her back. So, a bit of a concern there, but I don't know if it'll be too big of an issue in this fight because Yanan is not much of a wrestler, not much of a grappler either. She has shown she could hit some trips and sweeps and stuff, but I don't think that's a very big part of her game. We did see her get a bit of top control time over Jocelyn Edwards, but that was a fight where Edwards almost armbarred Yanan, actually, and outside of that exchange, Yanan didn't really have much success in the grappling. And honestly, I feel like that was a loss that really didn't even age all that well because, everyone else is pretty much dominating Edwards in the grappling department. whereas Yanan basically almost got armbarred. So, I don't think that's a real strong part of her game. Yanan is primarily just looking to strike with opponents. Bit of a volume striker, but honestly, I don't think she's really a good striker either. She's got a lot of feints, lots of movement on the feet, but I really don't know if it's doing much. Honestly, it looks a little ridiculous coming from her, but I think the best way to really describe Yanan is that she's just kind of clumsy, kind of slow in there. Her strikes are pretty telegraphed. She's got a pretty big, frame for the division, but I don't know if she really uses it all that well. She's got a jab and a kick that she will throw out occasionally, but it's not something that's super effective, and it's not something she's very consistent with either. She kind of just defaults to look to counter-strike and occasionally flurry opponents. So while she does have the frame for the division, and she is pretty tough, I don't think there's really much process to her game, and I do think that overall she does need a lot of polishing up, in the striking and even in the grappling. So basically, what I'm trying to say here is Yanan's a pretty terrible fighter. However, she is still pretty young, so she may be making improvements, but I just haven't really been seeing it fight to fight. In fact, I feel like there's a potential regression in her game, because between her, I think, Inoue fight and Edwards fight, it looked like honestly, the striking looked a bit worse. So I don't know what to make of Yanan other than that. I don't really think she's that good, and I don't know if she's going to be making big enough improvements in her game for her to win this fight, which I don't think she's going to win. So the pick for me, obviously, is going to be Silva in this fight. I think Silva's just the much better striker, much cleaner striker, much heavier hitter as well. Yanan might be able to weasel her way to a win. She is someone who does make noises. She's got lots of movement in there. So maybe she's able to trick some of the judges into scoring it for her, but I don't really think that there's really any substance in her strikes, honestly. Like, she might be able to hit Silva with some of the flurries, and Silva is somewhat hittable, so she's going to be able to find the mark occasionally, but overall, I just think that Silva's striking is just much more dynamic. She's going to be landing the much more impactful shots, so I do favor Silva on the feet. And if this does somehow hit the ground, I do think that Silva is live for a submission. I don't like that Silva plays off her back, but we did see Yanan get put in some pretty, compromising situations against Edwards, and I do think that someone like Silva may be able to snatch up a limb or something. So I do think that if it hits the ground, we could see a submission from Silva. And on the feet, I do favor Silva. So where the line is at now, I don't really disagree. I don't see too many paths there for Yanan. Like, realistically, she may be able to win a fight on volume, but I don't know if that's too likely. Maybe she's able to lay on top of Silva, really work the lay and pray game plan, but, she hasn't really shown that either. And, I don't know if she's a good enough wrestler and grappler to pull that off either. So I got to go with Silva in the spot. Silva honestly has faced much better opponents either. She's competitive in the striking with a good boxer in Moroz and absolutely just beat the shit out of De La Rosa. So I think Silva's the better striker, better grappler. I think she should win this. Either by decision or by submission. So give me Silva in the spot. Might look to parlay her small honestly, because I really don't think Yanan's a good fighter. I don't think she's UFC caliber. So give me Silva in the spot. And in the next fight, we have Andre Fialho versus Miguel Baeza. And Baeza is the minus 180 favorite. Come back on. Fialho is plus 155. And this should be a pretty fun fight. Both guys generally looking to strike in there. Both guys, a lot of exciting finishes as well, so this should be a fun one. But we'll start with Fialho. Fialho is a pretty heavy-handed striker, likes to just pressure opponents and drop hammers on him. The guy's extremely dangerous, especially early in the fight. Prior to his UFC debut, he was on a 4-fight knockout streak, and 2 of those knockouts were against ex-UFC fighters, so I do think the guy's pretty dangerous. And even in his UFC debut, on short notice, he was able to take that first round off Pereira and actually had him in a bit of trouble. So, pretty impressive there, all things considered. He did drop those last 2 rounds pretty decisively. The cardio has always been an issue for Fialho, and, coming in short notice, it definitely didn't help him. He's pretty cooked. He was able to continue to move forward, but the output just completely fell off a cliff after those first 2 rounds, or after that first round, and Pereira was able to just tee off on him in that second and third round. Really good toughness on Fialho's side, though. But yeah, the thing with Fialho really is just the fact that he will slow down. Even in fights before that, he's slowing down as well. In the Antonio Dos Santos fight, the guy was gassed, and then of course he did get finished by Chris Curtis in the third round as well. So the guy's cardio is definitely a concern here, but he is still extremely dangerous in that first round. He's going to be going up against Baeza, who is a pretty dangerous striker himself. Baeza, primarily a striker. He has shown he could wrestle, well, not wrestle, but he's shown he could grapple a little bit, does have some jiu-jitsu, but most of his fights do play out on the feet. He's very consistent with the leg kicks. He does throw some very heavy leg kicks. We saw, those kicks give Ponzinibbio some trouble. It gave Chaos Williams some trouble as well. So the guy's got a solid leg kick. He's got some pretty sharp striking as well. I think he's got pretty quick hands. Good volume. He showed that he could fight in a pretty high-paced 3-round striking affair as well. So lots to like on the Baeza side. But I do think there are some concerns in terms of the chin for Baeza. I'm not going to completely write his chin off right now, but he did get hurt against Brown a couple fights ago, and he is coming off of a knockout loss against Chaos Williams. And so while I don't think his chin's completely cooked at this point, you do have to wonder how he's going to look coming off of his first knockout loss like that. And he is going up against another really heavy hitter in Fiallo. So I think early it's going to be pretty tough for Baeza. Fiallo is going to likely pressure him, but Baeza does have pretty good footwork in there, good side-to-side movement that'll give Fiallo some issues in terms of landing something clean. Pereira did a pretty decent job avoiding some of the power shots of Fiallo in their fight, so I do think that Baeza can emulate that a little bit in this fight. I do think the leg kicks are going to be trouble for Fiallo. Especially as the fight drags on, we're going to start to see that damage build up. We're going to see his mobility maybe get a little more limited. And on top of that, we're going to see him start to slow down a bit. So I definitely do favor Baeza coming into that second and third round, but I just don't know if I could really trust Baeza right now against a heavy hitter, especially at chalk. So I like Baeza to win, but I just don't know if I really want to lay the juice on Baeza right now. Him coming off of a knockout loss and going up against a heavy hitter like this, it might end up not really mattering in this fight, but it is enough to deter me from betting Baeza in the spot. But I do like him to win. I think that he should be able to win rounds 2 and 3 at a pretty high clip. I don't know if he's going to be able to find the late finish. Fiallo did show some crazy durability in the Pereira fight, and I'm not sure if Baeza is going to be pushing a crazy enough pace to the point where he'll be able to break Fiallo come that third round. So give me Baeza in the spot. Give me Baeza by a unanimous decision. And in the next fight, we have Caio Borralho versus Gadzi Omargadzhiev. And Omargadzhiev's the minus 135 favorite. Come back on Borralho is plus 115. And we'll start with Borralho first. So Borralho, he is primarily a karate fighter. Lots of movement on the feet. Does like to bounce in and out of the pocket. Very good use of kicks. Good volume. Pretty good timing as well. He's got pretty quick hands. I have seen him mixing some takedowns as well. It's not a big part of his game, but it is something I've seen him routinely mix in some of his fights. Not sure how much power the guy really has. I think he's more of a decisionator. Generally just looking to outpoint opponents, and mixing the wrestling as well to win minutes. The cardio's pretty good. The volume's pretty good. He does a pretty good job of actually mixing up his shots, really sitting down on certain shots while kind of just looking to touch opponents on others. Overall, I do like the striking game of Borralho. But as far as his takedown defense and defensive grappling, it still is a bit of a question mark. I wasn't really able to find too many fights where that gets tested. A lot of the fights he's had on the regional scene, and even on the contender series, is against strikers. We did see Aaron Jeffrey the first time, or his first contender series fight. Have a lot of success in the clinch. Was able to control him for I think extended periods, somewhat. Along the cage. Wasn't able to hit too many takedowns though, but I don't know if Jeffrey's a great wrestler. So still a big question mark about Borralho's game. And it is a bit of a concern because he's going up against Omargadzhiev, who is a pretty solid wrestler. Gadzi, he's a bit plotty on the feet, big winging punches, but, he's very strong, and he does seem to have, pretty good takedown entries. And, he is generally looking to secure position before raining down the ground and pound. Lots of early finishes, but, I've seen him go the distance as well, which is a good sign. You don't want to see a wrestler just gas out in there after the first round and a half of grappling. So I do think the cardio should check out here for for García. But yeah, this is a pretty interesting fight. Obviously, we have a clash of styles here between, a wrestler and a striker. I don't think either guy's really faced someone of their level quite yet. I don't think García's really faced a good striker, or not. I wouldn't say he hasn't faced a good striker, but I don't think he's really faced a good karate guy before. Whereas with Bahayo, I don't think he's really faced a good wrestler. Or I don't think he's faced a wrestler at all in his career. So it's going to be pretty interesting in that regards. On the feet, I definitely have to favor Bahayo. I think the volume and the footwork of Bahayo could definitely give García some trouble. But I do think that, we're eventually going to see García get his hands on Bahayo, really work his wrestling, and grind his way to a decision victory here. I've already placed a small bet on García in the spot, but, I don't know if that's actually a great bet because, I'm kind of just playing into the matchup a little bit here. Usually I do favor wrestlers in these sort of fights. However, with all the unanswered questions on both ends, this could definitely blow up in my face. But at minus 135, I didn't think the price was too bad. I felt that, García might have a bit of upside here. However, at like minus 160, minus 170, I probably wouldn't play it just because we don't really know how good or how bad the takedown defense or get-ups of Bahayo really is. So in summation, I am kind of just taking a bit of a blind shot on the Russian wrestler. And honestly, I can't really say it's a great bet or anything. But I will say this, a lot of these guys, or a lot of these Russians with these repeating names or double first names, or I don't know what the actual terminology is, but, these guys like Askarov, Magomedov, Omar Gadziev, there's just something about these guys, they can wrestle. So, I just felt compelled to play him here. And, at minus 135, I don't think the price tag is too bad here. So, yeah, I just poked him small here. I think that the wrestling, the top control time, I think he can get it done here. So the pick for me in this fight is going to be García. I think his cardio should be good enough for him to hit takedowns in at least 2 of the 3 rounds and get enough top control time to win a unanimous decision here. So give me García by unanimous decision. And in the main event, we have the rematch between Belal Muhammad and Vicente Luque. And Luque is the minus 170 favorite. Comeback on Muhammad is plus 150. And we'll start with Muhammad first. So Muhammad, he's a very well-rounded fighter. The guy could just about do everything in the ring there. But, first and foremost, I do think he's more of a volume striker. He likes to pressure opponents, but he can play the outside game as well. Not the biggest hitter in there, but he is got pretty good volume, pretty good output. And overall, he is a bit of a decisionator. And like I said before, he is very well-rounded. He's able to mix in the wrestling to help him win minutes as well. Obviously, he's coming off of a very dominant performance, or a very dominant wrestling performance against Wonderboy. But he has shown it that he can mix in the wrestling in previous fights as well. However, something I do want to say here is I don't know if I necessarily want to overrate his wrestling coming out of that matchup here because, it is a little tricky because, it's hard to tell just how good the wrestling of Belal has really gotten versus, how much of it is just that maybe Wonderboy's takedown defense and defensive grappling is maybe not as good as we thought it was. Because I do remember, Wonderboy was a pretty big favorite against Burns, pretty big favorite against Muhammad as well. Even coming off of his loss to Burns, where Burns basically just, held him against the cage for, a good 10 minutes. And we were able to actually cash in both of those spots. But what I'm trying to say here is I think that maybe the takedown defense or the defensive grappling of Wonderboy, maybe not quite as good as, what we thought going into those fights. So while Belal did look really good in that fight, I don't want to just all of a sudden assume that Belal's some elite level wrestler or anything. But I will say this about Belal, he did show really good cardio in that fight, really good aggression with it. And, I do think that if he's able to bring that sort of, pressure and pace with the wrestling into this fight, he could definitely have a shot of winning here. And I do think that's probably going to be his primary game plan because Luque is a very dangerous striker on the feet. The guy's got big power, very good timing and pressure in there. The guy's just been able to consistently find the chin of a lot of his opponents. And I don't know what his actual knockdown rate is, but I'm sure it's pretty high because I think in every one of his fights I watch, he's able to hurt his opponents, get a knockdown. But yeah, the guy's just got a ton of power. And I think the only decisions he's gone to were against Mike Perry and Leon Edwards. Edwards obviously probably going to challenge for the title soon. So very high level guy. And then Mike Perry, just a really tough motherfucker. And he did do some serious damage to Mike Perry in that fight. So yeah, Luque, super dangerous on the feet, but super dangerous on the ground as well. The guy is a black belt, and he does have some pretty slick submissions in there. Prior to his little knockout streak here, he was, getting a ton of submissions, earlier in his career as well. So yeah, the guy can get it done on the feet and on the ground, but he does prefer to knock guys out generally. But overall, I do think this fight is very interesting because historically, Luque has struggled against guys who've been able to wrestle and grapple him very heavily. Obviously, on The Ultimate Fighter, Mike Graves was able to beat him with a wrestle-heavy game plan. Granted, that was very early in his career. And also Leon Edwards was able to wrestle and clinch up with him and beat him that way. But that was a really weird fight also because it looked like Luque was initiating a lot of the clinch exchanges also, instead of just looking to fight at distance. But yeah, very weird fight. And, it looked like Luque, some of the power was still carrying in the third round. He still was very aggressive there. Wasn't able to pull it off, but a loss that's not aged too badly because Leon Edwards is a very high-level guy and, again, probably going to challenge for the title soon. And then, even in the Chiesa fight, Chiesa was able to put Luque in some trouble. Obviously, Luque very high level on the ground as well and was able to reverse Chiesa and ultimately find the submission. But there definitely are some concerns for Luque in this fight, especially if Belal is able to implement a wrestle and grapple heavy game plan. I know that Belal's got, really good cardio in there as well. So, he might be able to, or he should be able to do it for at least, 3 rounds. And, if he's able to do that, I do think he could, wrestle his way to a decision. But there definitely are some concerns on the Belal end as well. Belal, in my opinion, has struggled against heavy hitters that can pressure him. Obviously, Luque did it very well the first time, was able to knock him out. And then Jeff Neal was able to do it as well. Jeff Neal, very big hitter, was able to pressure Belal. And, even Lyman Good was able to have some success there. Obviously, Lyman Good did lose that fight, but that was a very close fight. And Lyman Good, while, stylistically he did present some troubles for Belal, he just is not quite on the level of these guys like Jeff Neal and Luque. But, he did still make it a very close fight. And obviously, the Edwards fight, I think, was a little telling as well. Edwards, Edwards historically has been a decisionator, but I feel like Edwards does have pretty underrated power, and he definitely got the respect of Belal early in that fight. And real quick, I do want to call back to the Leon Edwards-Luque fight as well, where Luque was just, clinching up with Edwards. I think it's because, Edwards was actually landing some pretty heavy shots on Luque as well, and Luque probably didn't want too much to do with him, in terms of the striking. So I could be wrong there, but I do feel that Edwards does seem to have pretty underrated power in the division. Definitely, one of the heaviest hitters who don't have a knockout, if that even makes sense. But going back to this fight, I do think that I do think that Luque can provide a lot of troubles on the feet for someone like Belal still. And the fights do start standing, so Belal's going to have to work his way into a takedown. And I do think that we see Luque potentially catch him, if he's not, setting it up correctly and he's getting a little careless in there. Because, some of the takedowns that Belal was hitting against Thompson, they were a bit wild. He was kind of just bull rushing Thompson, and it didn't seem like he really respected the power of Thompson coming his way. And Thompson, he's a very sharp, very accurate striker who's got a number of knockouts on his record, but Thompson's not like a raw power sort of guy. He's more of like a precision striker, and Belal was able to kind of just close the distance really quickly, get his hands on Thompson, and just peel him to the ground. Whereas in this fight, I don't know if Belal's going to be able to do that. I think if he's just kind of bum rushing Luque like he did Thompson, I think that Luque is going to be able to put him out. So I do think that Belal, he's going to have to entertain the striking a little bit. Can't make his takedowns too telegraphed, otherwise he gets put out. But in doing so, I think he's going to play with fire a little bit, and I do think that we see Luque eventually find the chin of Belal. And Luque, his style, it's a very pressure-heavy style, so he's going to have Belal backing up a lot of this fight, and I just don't know if Belal's going to have too much wrestling success if that's going on. And even if Belal is able to take Luque down, I think that Luque is going to be able to offer much more resistance than Wonder Boy. I think that he's got much better, grappling. He's got much better get-ups than Belal. And who's to say he can't even submit Belal when he's on the ground as well. So I think that Belal is going to be in some trouble wherever the fight goes. Obviously, he'll be much safer if he is able to get the wrestling going, but I don't know if he's going to have too much success there. I think we're going to see Luque work his way back up to the feet, even if he gets taken down. And I think he's going to be able to knock Bilal out. So I think Luque likely gets it done, by knockout once again. Either round 1 or round 2. I think both are pretty live, but I do think that Luque is eventually going to find the chin of Bilal. So give me Luque in the spot. Probably going to bet him for a couple units. Might even put a unit on Luque inside the distance once the props open up. But yeah, I do like Luque in the spot here. Maybe the wrestling of Bilal has really leveled up and he's able to repeatedly take Luque down. But I just think that over the course of 5 rounds, we see Luque eventually find the chin of Bilal. So give me Luque by knockout. And that will do it for this episode of the podcast. Really appreciate you guys tuning in here. I know we've had a rough few weeks here, but if you guys do any sort of investing or chart reading or technical analysis and have understanding of the Wyckoff method or Gann indicators or whatever these hucksters are peddling these days, you'll see that this is actually perfectly healthy chart behavior. As you see here, we're at an all-time high a few weeks ago. A little bit of resistance here and a little bit of pullback there. But, this is perfectly normal behavior. It's unlikely or impossible, I should say, for us to be moving up week over week. So just a little bit of correction, a little bit of pullback. And, I believe we have hit a level of support here, and we should be looking to bounce back and moving up and away. The macro trends definitely look like they're still in our favor here, and we're on the road to break 50 units very shortly here. And one last thing, guys, this is not financial advice, but please hit that like, comment, and subscribe. Bye-bye.